Hi there guys, this video is going to be on rebuilding the Rapid MK1. So what I thought I'd do is start with the trigger, as it is the most complicated part of the rifle. Having said that though, the trigger itself is fairly simple. So what I've done is I've taken all the pieces out and I'll show you in which order to put them back together. So we'll start off with the trigger blade here. The trigger blade uses this spring here. What happens, that spring goes in the rear of the trigger like so, and then this short pin goes through the middle and catches it in position like that. Then you bend the spring down slightly and this stepped pin here goes in this bigger hole. Wiggle it in to find its seat, and once the spring's in there it holds both pins in there and they're not going to fall out. Next what we're going to do is put this top sear in. So I've taken one side of the circlip on this pin out and I've left the other side. What we do is we start the pin in the hole like so, then with our top sear and this spring we assemble it so the spring is latched on the bottom. Put the sear in and push the pin through. We won't put the C-clip on it at the moment, as we will need to push this pin out in order to get this spring to seat. What we'll do next is put in the trigger. So just line it up with this hole here, and then you can just push the short pin through the two pieces like that. And then we can attach the C-clip on this side. And there we have it, the trigger blade's now captive. Lastly is the only tricky part of the operation. So this sear has to go under this one, and then this spring hooks around the front of the sear like so. Once the spring's seated, what we can do is take our slave pin and push it through the middle so that it goes through all the way. I will say now that my trigger, I've taken the safety off. I didn't really like it. It was just a flip over and stopped the trigger blade from being pulled up, so I took mine off. However, at this stage, if you were using your trigger safety, you'd have to put that on as you pushed your slave pin through. Once we're at this stage, we allow this back pin here to come back slightly, and we have to stretch this trigger spring into the back. Sometimes easier if you get a flat bladed screwdriver. Push the spring down and then wiggle the pin through like that. So the trigger now is in working condition, and if you're wondering, the trigger sears have already been polished. I didn't do it, it was done by the previous owner, but they're already polished, so there's not much point in polishing the trigger sears again. We'll say that he has taken some off both the sears, so the sear is quite close to the edge there, but the trigger still seems to work, so that's not a bad thing. The last thing we have to do is just install the C-clip on it. If we were using the safety spring does loop around this pin, so you'd put the spring on, then put the C-clip on. Next, I'll just reinstall the trigger into the block. You can get a hammer and hammer spring in the rifle with the trigger in, so I'll stick it in now. So all that happens, place the trigger down there. So with the trigger roughly in place, we take our style washer and standoff and we screw it into the bottom there. And that's done with a 3/16 Allen key. Now I like to leave mine a little loose so we can align the trigger with the little hole in the side there. So when the pin's lined up with the hole, we can just push the permanent pin through. There it is there. So we'll go ahead and tighten the standoff up, making sure that the trigger stays nice and square. So next thing we'll do is we'll reinstall the probe and the bolt carrier. So before that goes in, just going to add a small smear of molly grease to the outside. Push it into the back of the block, and then we'll reattach the bolt handle, tightening it up with a 5mm Allen key. Once the probe's in, we'll reattach the cock and dog. Cock and dog's down in the bottom there. So we'll get the flat lined up with the top, and then using a 3 30-seconds Allen key, we'll place it in. Then I'll just nip that up with the spanner. Like so. Once that's in there, we can put the hammer spring and inertia weight back. So the inertia weight's in the bottom there, and the hammer spring goes in the back. Drop it through the back, and then what we have to do is pull up the trigger sear there. That allows the hammer to fall through. Once that's in, we'll just put the hammer spring adjuster back in the back. I'm going to leave it out for now, and we'll readjust the power once the rifle's all built up. Next, I'll just put on the side pieces. That's just using a 1.5mm Allen key. Right then, next we'll tackle the valve. So I've already cut the old O-rings off, and we'll just replace the new ones. Now my one is slightly different from the standard valve, but the procedure to fit the new O-rings is identical. So for this one, I've cut the old one off, and we're just going to place the new one around the outside, like so. Then add some silicone grease, like so. There is another one on the front here, but I just replaced that off camera. It's really easy, all you do is pull it off, put the new one on. Got a small amount of silicone grease on those two O-rings. And then for the valve pin itself, it's quite a small O-ring, we have to stretch it over the tip here. There it is. And again, we'll just put a small amount of silicone grease around it, and then we can reassemble the valve. Now you just got to be quite careful, as if you push too hard you might pinch this O-ring in the back here. So just be careful, wiggle it through, and it should find its way in. So that's the valve rebuilt, and we can just put it back in the rifle. So this side hole here needs to be aligned with the side. Put it in and push it home. It's probably easier to cock the hammer back and lock it back so there's no preload on the valve. Then we can put the small grub screw in and tighten it down with a 1.5mm Allen key, making sure that the valve's pushed all the way home. Then we can reinstall the valve cover. Now there is an O-ring on the back here. I'll just cut the old one off, and the new one's really simple to put on. So a small amount of silicone grease around it, and then we'll screw it in the front. And like I said in this assembly, this one on my rifle is using a 5mm Allen key, however your one may be slightly different. So there's the valve front back in. And next we'll reinstall the bottle valve. New O-ring over the front here. Slide it down, and then a small amount of silicone grease, and we can reinstall it in the front. And with that done, we're almost finished. Next I'm going to put in the little cover plate here. That's using a 3 30-seconds Allen key. Next up, I'm going to put the block back in the stock. So making sure the hammer spring adjuster is flush, we'll put the block back in the stock, line up the bottom holes, drop our trigger guard in, then do it up using a 4mm Allen key. And then finally we can reinstall the barrel and the scope rings. So I'll put the barrel in first. It's easier if you cocked a rifle. Wiggle the barrel into position and align the D10 up with the grub screw hole. Stick the grub screw in, and on my rifle it's been enlarged so it's a 3mm Allen key. Your rifle may be different. Make sure the barrel's nice and tight, then we'll do up the clamp screw. And that's with a 4mm Allen key. Nice and tight, and there we have it. I can put the scope rings back on now and pressurise the rifle back up. I'll leave the top caps off now, but I'll be putting a scope on a little later. Okay then, the final thing for me to do is pressurise it back up and then readjust the hammer spring. So I won't bother showing you that, it's pretty simple. So that's going to be it for this one guys. So thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.